So humanity is always constantly walking on eggshells when it comes to our own destruction. But it's not always just humanity. It's oftentimes anything can be used to destroy everything that we've created. Sure, we may be irresponsible with nuclear weapons and it could destroy us at any moment, but there's also outside forces that we've come to with many close calls over our past history. So for this video, I'm going to talk about all the times where the world almost ended. The Cuban Missile Crisis, 1962. For 13 days in October 1962, the world waited, seemingly on the brink of nuclear war, and hoped for a peaceful resolution to the Cuban Missile Crisis. During the Cold War, the United States and the Soviet Union confronted each other directly and violently. At that time, these two superpowers were at their closest point to a nuclear exchange. President Kennedy imposed a quarantine on Cuba in response, preventing Soviet ships from traveling there. Neither party wanted to go to war, but if either one got violent when they both met at the blockade, it could have ended badly for everyone. Thankfully, the ships were called off and both parties kept their promises. Soviet missiles were taken out of Cuba and American officials made a commitment not to invade Cuba. The United States managed to prevent nuclear war by taking out our missiles out of Turkey. Another time during the same year was when a Soviet submarine almost shot a nuclear torpedo at the United States forces. Captain Valentin Savitsky, I'm so sorry if I'm just butchering these Russian names, believing war had started, ordering the launch. However, the protocol required a unanimous approval from the submarine's officers. Vasily Arkhipov, the flotilla commodore, refused to consent, persuading Savitsky to surface instead. This crucial decision prevented a potential nuclear conflict. Arkhipov's restraint and judgment are credited with averting a global catastrophe during one of the most tense moments of the Cold War. So in other words, 1962 was pretty much the closest we've ever gotten to nuclear war. Long story short, if we've ever had to endure nuclear war, the world would probably be destroyed. Nuclear winters, radiation poisoning, the entire climate will change, everything. Humanity's pretty much not going to live after that. So that's why nuclear war and World War III, we're trying not to let happen. Let's hope so. The Carrington Event, 1859. In summer 1859, the sun erupted with a giant force of energy that was sent to the Earth, known as a solar flare. The magnetic energy was so powerful that it jammed every single electronic on Earth. Some machines back then, like the telegraph, malfunctioned and would explode into flames. For days, people couldn't communicate with each other, nor did anyone know if this change was permanent. Not only did this phenomenon cause all electronics to fail, but the solar flare caused all over the world to lose track of time. The night sky was blood red and birds were chirping. People thought it was the morning and started heading to work, but in reality it was still the middle of the night. The world was in chaos and people didn't know what to do. Now, we call this the Carrington Event because the astronomer, Richard Carrington, was the first to spot all these white explosions on the sun. And then hours later, chaos ensued on the world. So he put two and two together. Back then, people thought it was the end of everything and prepared for the worst. Luckily, we only just had some bright nights, magnetic energy in our atmosphere, and no technological communication for a few days. Other than that, things went back to normal. Now, if we had the Carrington Event similar today, I think our technology can probably withstand, because we're more durable, but back in the 1800s, technology wasn't that good. So when all electronics started failing on the planet, people were preparing for the worst, that if this could end everything. It's kind of similar to the Y2K Bug, which I'm going to talk about later in this video. The 450 Comet Shower, 1883. On August 12th to the 13th of 1883, a Mexican astronomer, Jose Bonilla, discovered 450 comets crossing over the face of the sun. He was just in the right place at the right time to see it when nobody else did. It turns out that a large comet weighing approximately 1 billion tons was about to enter Earth's orbit, breaking apart and just barely grazing us. This comet was so large that it could have wiped out all life on Earth. It was estimated to be about 363 miles or 584 kilometers away from the Earth. If this comet didn't break apart and the comet's path was slightly different, the comet could have been more powerful than what have caused the dinosaurs to go extinct. Honestly, we don't really have technology to stop an asteroid strike. So if there's an asteroid hitting towards Earth at any time, we're screwed. That's why an asteroid strike can be just as threatening as nuclear war. It's pretty much nature's way of atomic bomb. The Korean War, 1953. So I'm not really going to talk about the Korean War so much itself. I'll just briefly explain it for those who don't know. In the early 1950s, Korea was split into two, and the North was trying to invade the South. North Korea was backed up by the Soviet Union, while South Korea was backed up by the United States. General Douglas MacArthur intended on using nuclear weapons on the Chinese troops when they crossed over the North Korean border as a defense mechanism. President Truman gave MacArthur and the United States forces 9 atomic bombs to use however necessary to stop the communists. Why? That's a bit extreme. Thankfully, by the time MacArthur arrived, the war was already over, and the nukes were never used. General MacArthur had very extreme plans when running the military, and his actions could have caused World War III. Thankfully, he was relieved from his duties later in his career because of these extreme plans. If MacArthur had it his way, his actions could have caused the end of the world. You see how much damage a nuke can do. Like how the atomic bombs were dropped on Hiroshima and Nagasaki. MacArthur, this guy was nuts. He was just using nukes like it was gonna be nothing. Crazy man. The Y2K Bug, 1999. In 1999, computer scientists thought a simple glitch could potentially end every single electronic in the world. This coding error when the clock struck midnight of January 1st, 2000, could make all electronics such as simple computers, cars, vending machines, hospital equipment, and nuclear weapons grids unusable. To save memory, the computers would have microchips with dates that would only have the last 2 digits of the current year. For example, when living in 1999, computers will have the year say 99. When living in 2000, computers will say 00. Computers supposedly would not know the date and would cease to function by the time it turned 2000. Although a lot of people saw this as a hoax, others took this seriously and prepared for doomsday by stocking up food, water, and ammo. Some sadly ended their own lives fearing the end of the world was inevitable. It really goes to show you how us humans are so dependable on technology. Sure, I like my video games, but I'm not scared to pick up a book every now and then, like, come on. Anyway, much like the Carrington Event, it didn't cause as much catastrophe as people thought. Sure, some machines needed maintenance that costed the world billions of dollars to repair, but that was about it. Still really scary to think how people can be so crazy and irrational in such supposed doomsday events. The Spanish flu pandemic, 1918. In the year 1918, the world was hit by a threatening pandemic known as the Great Influenza Epidemic, or the Spanish flu. It came in 3 different waves, with the second one being the worst, eventually infecting every single country in the world. When infected, it was a 2.5% fatality rate. Nobody was safe from this virus. Even if you were the healthiest man on Earth, this virus could potentially still kill you. Of the estimated 50 million people who got infected from the Spanish flu, 50 million of those infected died. It doesn't seem like a lot today, but in 1918, the world's population was 1.8 billion, and 500 million got infected. That's almost half of the world's population at the time. Thankfully, scientists can now determine that the Spanish flu was an H1N1 influenza type A virus out of the A, B, C, and D types. A and B are the very serious types, and the C can be more treated as if it was a cold virus that lasts a couple of days. And type D fortunately only affects cattle. We can find the descendant DNA of the Spanish flu and viruses today. Compared to the recent pandemic we had in 2020, it was nothing compared to the pandemic we had a century ago. Now, humanity may have gotten lucky, but if something as powerful as the Spanish flu could happen today, I don't think we have the power to stop it. Can you imagine a super virus that had the ability to destroy everything in its path and could kill everything it infects? I don't even want to think about it. The Norwegian rocket incident, 1995. On January 25th, 1995, a team of scientists in Norway launched a rocket to study a light phenomenon in the northern hemisphere known as the aurora borealis. It seems harmless enough. However, Moscow first saw this rocket as a sign of a nuclear attack and were contemplating whether or not to retaliate their attack against the United States. Like we did anything wrong, jeez. A briefcase was taken to the Russian president to launch the nuclear retaliation remotely. The president at the time, Boris Yeltsin, didn't believe that America would shoot a random missile at Russia for no reason. Instead, he would wait on updates on what to do. Thankfully, the rocket didn't end up moving away from Russia and fell right into the sea, which turned out to be a huge misunderstanding. Norway told Russia ahead of time that they would be using this rocket for scientific research, but I guess the Russians forgot. I don't know how that happened. I guess the information didn't really spread that much. Who knows? Boris Yeltsin was known to be a huge alcoholic, but thankfully during the crisis, he was sober. If he had to make the decision while intoxicated, it could have caused World War III. The solar plasma eruption, 2012. In 2012, we made jokes about the end of the world, but in reality, we actually had another close call. Similar to the Carrington Event, the sun's surface erupted, but instead of a solar flare, it shot out a giant load of plasma energy. It was so powerful that it had the power to melt everything on the surface of a planet, or anything in its path. Thankfully, we didn't get hit by this, because the sun erupted in the opposite direction of the Earth's location into deep space. We were just a week away from ultimate destruction. If it happened at least a week earlier, we probably wouldn't even be here right now. So, all the stuff about how 2012 was going to be the end of the world, that's not completely wrong. To think that a solar plasma energy strike from the sun could just wipe out the world in seconds, and there was nothing we could have done about it, that's honestly terrifying. The Soviet nuclear false alarm, 1983. Stanislav Petrov, a lieutenant colonel in the Soviet Air Defense Forces, was responsible for monitoring a nuclear early warning system from the Shcherpurtov 15 bunker near Moscow. In the early hours of September 26, 1983, the system detected what looks like an incoming nuclear missile from the United States. This was followed by 4 more. The protocol at the time clearly dictated that a perceived attack required immediate retaliation. Petrov reasoned that the first nuclear attack would involve considerably more than just a couple of missiles, and concluded that the system was malfunctioning. The fact that Petrov correctly identified the detections as a false alarm almost certainly prevented his commanding officers initiating a counterattack, which could have led to nuclear war. It later emerged that the error laid with the system's satellites, which had sunlight reflecting off the high-altitude clouds, which the system mistaked as missiles. Petrov later took an early retirement, and his story remained classified until the fall of the Soviet Union. It honestly was a good thing that Petrov trusted his gut and decided not to take immediate action and notify his superiors, because that just indirectly saved the world. God bless this man. Rest in peace, Petrov. The training tape incident, 1979. On the morning of November 9th, 1979, the computers at the North American Aerospace Defense Command's Shin Mountain Site, the Pentagon's National Military Command Center, and the Atlantic National Military Command Center in Fort Ritchie, Maryland, all showed a massive Soviet nuclear strike aimed at destroying the United States and nuclear forces. There was a press conference immediately with all these parties, and just like every single doomsday scenario, they were contemplating on launching a counterattack against the Soviet Union. So it wasn't just the USSR that kept seeing these false alarms. The United States had theirs too. Launch control centers for Minuteman missiles buried deep below the prairie grass in the American West received preliminary warning that the United States was under nuclear attack. The alert did not stop with the US ICBM force. The entire Continental Air Defense Force was put on alert, and at least 10 fighters took off. Furthermore, the National Emergency Airborne Command Post, the president's doomsday plane, was also launched, but thankfully the president never needed to use this. It was later determined that the realistic training tape had been inadvertently inserted into the computer running the nation's early warning programs. However, within minutes of the original alert, the officers had reviewed raw data from the satellites and checked the early warning radars ringing the country. The radars were capable of spotting missiles launched from submarines close to the US shores and ICBM warheads that have traveled far enough from the trajectories to rise above the curvature of the Earth. The satellites were capable of detecting launches of the Soviet missiles almost anywhere on the Earth's surface. Neither system showed any signs that the country was under attack, so they canceled this alert. This is why, this is a test should be informed first before the simulation should be played. Because you could be mistaken as a real thing. That's why emergency alert systems say, this is a test. So no one can say this is a real thing. Glad we have that now. But back then, people weren't that careful. The GE3 Asteroid, 2018. This is actually one of the most recent times the world could have ended, which is honestly really scary. On April 14th, 2018, Catalina Sky Survey discovered an asteroid that was so close to the Earth and flew across the sky in Arizona with no warning whatsoever. Apparently, this asteroid was so close to the Earth, it had less than half of a distance it would take to get to the moon. This asteroid was estimated to be 48 to 110 meters in diameter, making it the largest space object to be so close past Earth. Though it doesn't seem like as large as the comets that passed Earth in 1859, this asteroid stayed intact and was so close to hitting us. If this asteroid was slightly different into the path of Earth, this could have been as just as big of an asteroid as the 1859 comet. Yeah, good thing we haven't been hit by an asteroid yet. Thankfully, Jupiter has been saving us. Yeah, did you know that Jupiter's gravitational pull is so strong that it keeps asteroids away from hitting Earth? Jupiter's been doing a good job. Big ups Jupiter. The Black Death, 1346. In between the years of 1346 to 1353, Europe ended up losing nearly 30 to 50% of its entire population to the bubonic plague pandemic, also known as the Black Death. It was mainly spread by fleas and rats that came from infected ships coming from Central Asia. When infected with the plague, you nearly had a 40% chance of survival. You suffered from fever, headaches, chills, weakness, and one or more swollen, painful lymph nodes. Death from the bubonic plague was agonizingly slow. It got to the point that individual burials weren't even an option anymore, but instead mass graves were made to dump bodies of the people who died. Plague doctors were also used to treat the infected, but most of the time, there was nothing they could do to stop the inevitable deaths of 200 million people. So the world's population at the time was 350 to 375 million. That's pretty bad. Yeah, so this pandemic could have easily killed off the human race. The only way people avoided the Black Plague was to surround themselves in fire, like the Pope did, and he survived, or to live really, really far away, isolated from society. The Black Plague has to be one of the worst pandemics in human history. The Toba supervolcano eruption, 72,000 BCE. Now I know this one's not that recent, and it takes place in the prehistoric times, but this one supervolcano almost ended our species. Although not one of the last times a supervolcano erupted on Earth, this specific supervolcano eruption nearly wiped out every single Homo sapien on the planet. Now, I'll just briefly tell you what a supervolcano is, in case people don't know. A supervolcano is a volcano that has erupted with a magnitude of 8 on the Volcanic Explosive Index, or VEI for short, which is the largest recorded value on the index. It is so powerful at one point, it could erupt more than 1,000 cubic kilometers or 240 cubic miles of material. If the eruption itself won't kill you, then the humongous tons of volcanic ash in the air could. This supervolcano almost wiped out all of humanity with only 3,000 to 10,000 people alive at the time. Could you imagine that? We were considered an endangered species once in our history. I mean, that's shocking to think of because today our planet nearly holds 8 billion people. The fact that we almost got extinct from this is crazy. This eruption did so much damage that it caused long-term climate change at the time. It's possible that this eruption caused one of the Earth's ice ages as the Earth went through huge cooling periods, causing surviving humans to endure harsh winters for thousands of years to come. Although the Toba supervolcano probably won't erupt for the next 600,000 years, it's possible a different supervolcano could erupt unexpectedly, and scientists can miscalculate the next eruption. If supervolcanoes like Yellowstone decide to erupt, the volcanic ash in the Earth's atmosphere could spread everywhere, and nobody can be safe from these eruptions. Yeah, volcanoes are a huge threat too. Yeah, they're not as common, but they're pretty dangerous though. I would hate to live in the prehistoric times. If you guys really do enjoy these type of content, do let me know in the comments down below. I have a ton of ideas on what I can do next. With that being said, thank you all so much for watching if you made it this far. I hope you all have a nice, safe, happy, and healthy day. Bye-bye!